Okay, I've just come back from Bangkok. Some of the Buddhist Fellowship were over there, like Angie and Jerry, and we were having a conference also, because instead of just having a meeting, we decided to talk about how these teachings of Buddhism can not just help people in their ordinary lives, but how it can actually help with things like the economic crisis, with the problem of terrorism and climate change. And so we're talking about all of these things for 3 days, all these very, very high and holy monks and nuns. And it's the first miracle. We just finished yesterday, and today the stock market went up. But if it goes down tomorrow, you can just blame the organisers of the conference. We should have been carried on for maybe a year. But there are such things as miracles in Buddhism, but you know that we don't really pay so much attention to the miracles, because they're more like the razzmatazz. We'd more like to talk about meditation and healing the mind and the body. But the miracles are what we call in Buddhism special effects. And sometimes the special effects are sometimes interesting. They're like the chili which you add to your food. The seasoning which you add to things, which makes it sort of interesting. So those of you who've never come to a talk here before, we don't always go on about miracles. We make it more practical. And even this evening's talk, I'm going to say a few things about miracles, because people are always interested in the supernatural. And remember, I was a scientist, a theoretical physicist, trained at Cambridge. So I'm a hard-nosed, logical person. And I won't believe anything unless it's got really solid evidence. A good example of that is about a year ago, many people, even here in Singapore, in the Buddhist Fellowship, were getting very, very excited when they started taking photographs in temples or on pilgrimage to places like the holy sites in India. Because in some of those photographs, when they were developed, there was these little circles. And they weren't there, and you couldn't see them with your eyes. They just magically appeared. And then people started calling them Deva lights. Devas are like the heavenly beings, like angels. And they became so excited. They would come up and show me these things. Ajahn Brahm, look, we've seen a Deva light. And even in the Buddhist Fellowship headquarters in those days, they took some pictures. They were Deva lights. And they were so excited. And it's very hard being a compassionate monk to disappoint. But you've got to be rational. The reason I started doubting this, you go on the internet, and actually if anyone still wants to find out about this phenomena, it's very simple. Just get on Google and just the 4 letters ORBS, orbs. And that's when you started seeing all these amazing pictures of these lights in pubs, in bars. And no self-respecting angel, this is not a Buddhist one, would actually go into a pub. And it's obvious, there was research done about it. As soon as the digital cameras came out and they found these things, the reason was, it's a very logical explanation. It's because the flashlight was closer to the front of the camera than the old, I might call them analog, the old style cameras. And because it was much closer to the top of the front of the camera, any dust particles would reflect that light and go straight back into the picture. It was classical diffraction patterns, which I saw when I was studying physics. It had a logical explanation. I remember this one fellow who did an experiment. He just took some shots with a camera, and he was just banging his carpet. which every carpet's got lots of dust in them, even in Singapore. You try and be clean, there's always dust around. And as soon as he banged the carpet, all these Deva lights came up. So it either really was dust or actually Devas live in carpets. And I think it must be dust. So be very careful about these miracles, because sometimes there are some which are real, but sometimes exploit those miracles. And I must say that when I went to Kuala Lumpur, I was giving a retreat in a temple in Kuala Lumpur, and I saw this picture of this monk. And it was above the donation box for his temple. And the picture had a Deva light in there. And it was, it was very clearly that was like a marketing campaign. This monk had Deva lights, therefore he was a holy monk, should give a donation. Now that's really not on in Buddhism. We don't do things like that. But other religions, they talk about miracles, and other religions, they make a lot about miracles. And if there's any slight miracle, they shout up and jump up and down, shouting hallelujah, and just convert everybody. And sometimes I think, wow, it's almost that we should talk about our miracles as well. It's like keeping up with the Joneses, like in fashion or anything else. If the other side is doing it, we should do it as well. But not quite the same. But there are Buddhist miracles. And being a scientist, I've seen some of those. There's Buddhist miracles in the time of the Buddha. But hopefully I'm going to make this talk so I'll show you some, but talk about some miracles. No, I'm not going to. You see, I read your mind. You wanted me to levitate or something. That's a miracle. Might talk about some miracles just to give you a flavour. And these are true ones which actually happened. But later on in the talk, I'm going to show actually what the Buddha's miracles were and how actually dealt with this phenomena. Because he didn't use it just to entertain people and make it like a freak show of monks who could do weird things. If you want to see a freak show or want to see sort of magical powers for entertainment, go and see those magicians like David Copperfield or whatever else. That's much more entertaining, even though it's not real. But the whole point of this is not just to entertain you and do weird things, because afterwards, so what? There's an old story about this Buddha meeting one of these monks who could walk on water, who'd walk across the Ganges. And when the Buddha met him, and this monk said, I've been practicing for 30 years in deep meditation. Now I can walk across the Ganges. And the Buddha turned around to his monk and said, what a stupid fellow this is. Just for, 50 cents, you could have got a boat across the Ganges. Is that what we're meditating for? To do something you could spend 50 cents on and just get across? But nevertheless, sometimes you do talk about some miracles, because what it does, it actually shows you some of the unexplained phenomena and the power of the mind. And I love these stories which I collect, which are weird stories. You might think they're miraculous. But really, all miracles is they're just something we haven't yet understood about the nature of the body and the mind, about the world. And what is a miracle today can be explained in 10 or 15 years' time. It has logical reasons to it. And the reason why we talk about miracles is that because all it is the nature of a mind. And being monks, we spend a huge amount of time meditating, training our mind, and empowering our mind, so we get to know what this mind can do. And it's amazing, the power of this mind. And when the mind really gets trained, or when it sometimes in other situations manifests its potential, people call it miracles. But it's just another part of nature. That's all. And one of the miracles which comes to mind, because people always, usually are looking about miracles with people's health, to make sure that, when you've got a cancer, that, pray for a miracle so you may be cured. Or, at least that the pain disappears. And, one of these miracles, these are from my personal experiences of my life as a monk. George, this is an Englishman. He had lung cancer. And he told me his story. Lung cancer, it got so bad, it was in both lungs. He caught it when it was a bit late. So when he went to the oncologist, they give you tests. I thought I got rid of all the tests when I finished school in university. But you get more tests. That's all they say, we'll give you a test. But anyway, they gave him this test. They gave him sort of many tests, and the thing was, he gave him an X-ray. And when he went to see his specialist, the oncologist showed him the X-ray. Both lungs were riddled with the lung cancer. He said, the first treatment would usually be to do surgery, to take out the infected parts of the lungs. We can't do this because it's all over. We can't take out both lobes, all the lobes of your lungs, both sides. So he said the only treatment left will be some very harsh radiation therapy and chemotherapy. But he said, look, I'll be honest with you, it's so severe. He can only really promise you maybe an extra 2 or 3 months on your life. Maybe it'd be more than that, we can never tell. What do you want to do? And I gave him the option. And his response was, I'll go back and talk it over with my wife and my children. I'm not sure. So he went back home. They had an appointment for him 1 week later. His specialist insisted on him taking another X-ray, just to see how the disease had progressed. It was very malignant. He went into his oncologist's room, and his specialist was looking at the new X-ray, shaking his head. Poor George thought it had got much worse. And so his reaction was, how many more days, doctor? It's got worse, hasn't it? And the doctor just looked up and said, George, I'm shaking my head not because it's got worse. I'm shaking my head because it's totally disappeared. What the hell have you been doing, George? He swore. You know what George answered? Meditating. I've been meditating. The doctor said, carry on. And old George is still alive. He's having a good time. Good old George. I actually saw him just a few weeks ago, we're buying some stuff for our retreat centre, and he was in a shopping centre, and had a few minutes talking with him, gave him another blessing. But this was not a real case, that sometimes that works. How can that happen? How can in 1 week, and the X-rays were there, hard evidence, in 1 week, or it could have been 2 weeks, I can't remember exactly the time now, but it was a very, very short period, the whole thing had totally disappeared. Now people will call that a miracle. And if that was, say, in some churches, they would jump up and down, praise the Lord. We do that as well here. I said, jump up and down, praise the Lord. Praise the Lord Buddha. Praise the Lord Buddha. I'm very cheeky sometimes, but anyway. But we know that it's not coming from any superior being. These are actually part of the nature of the mind. This is what your mind can do. It can sort of overcome these things. It's nature. Look, another example. This is one of the reasons we built this Jhana Grove Retreat Centre over in Perth. Now, we built it in Singapore, but you know how hard it is to get any land in Singapore. It's impossible. So, there's heaps of land in Australia. I think one day the Singapore government should get a boat and tug Australia closer to Singapore. And they can add a bit of land. But anyhow, that's what we built. And one of the reasons I built it over there, because I know that meditation really helps. I was giving this meditation retreat in Sydney some years ago, and there was one gentleman who came on the retreat, and he was making such a noise every time he started meditating. And even though people were very, very tolerant, after a while, people put all these notes in question time. Can you tell people to breathe silently instead of making such a noise? It really was disturbing, but then I answered their question. That man is dying of nasal cancer, of sinus cancer. His nasal passages are totally blocked with this tumour. His doctor has said it's untreatable. He's coming on this retreat as his last throw of the dice, just hoping that something might happen. And as soon as I said that, no one complained anymore. It's interesting that sometimes we complain, but we don't know the full story. Why that person is acting like that. Why they're saying such harsh things. They may be going through enormous trauma and difficulties. So when people irritate you, don't blame them straight away. A lot of time, if you really knew what they were going through, just like that person who was breathing loudly, he had no choice. He was dying. And so understanding with compassion solves a lot of irritations. We don't want to complain anymore. But anyway, on the very last day of the retreat, he came up to me and said something really weird happened. He was meditating and he was getting very peaceful. And he heard a pop. I always remember what he said. So it was a pop in his nose. And he could breathe again. The air could actually come in. And he hadn't been able to breathe for weeks. A few minutes later, it closed up again and he couldn't breathe. I thought that we got to meditation too late. I didn't think he was going to survive. But he came to see me about 3 or 4 years later. Do you remember me, he said. Please don't ask me that question. There's too many of you. You know, like a brain, like a computer. I've only got so many megabytes inside of here. But anyhow, I didn't remember him. And he said, I was that guy at that retreat who couldn't breathe. So if I carried on that meditation, and the cancer totally cleared. There's another miracle man. And it's not coming from some superior being. It's just the nature of what the mind can do when it's very peaceful and still. And this is really the greatest miracle of the Buddha. Actually to know just how a bit of peace and calm in people's lives can really help your health. It's a miracle, is it? No, not really. It's just the nature of things, which as Buddhists we really understand very deeply about how this mind works. But not only that, we also understand what the mind can't do. There was a book which became a bestseller called The Secret. How many of you silly people bought that book? Because we think that as long as we can imagine something, visualize it and believe in it. You know, the $100,000 check. Visualize it. Don't have any doubts. Don't doubt. If you have any doubts, it won't work. Visualize it. In your mailbox, right now. Right now, visualize it. And it will work. Come on. So you understand what the mind can do. You also understand what the mind can't do. And that's something it won't be able to do. Because the power of the mind also depends upon purity, on your kindness, on your goodness, on your charity. And that's an important thing. If you just want things and crave for things, especially personal things, it will not work. There's an old story about this. And I'm now going to go on to sort of other miracles about other beings who might help you. There's this fellow in Perth, Chinese. He dreamt of his dead father. He dreamt of his dead father saying, tomorrow, go to the casino. I'm going to help you through the financial crisis. And of course, he just forgot about it when he woke up. But then, as if, sometimes you can hear voices. He heard the voices and said, his father saying, today, go to the casino. Ayo, he said. This is really weird. So he went to the casino. And as soon as he went to the casino, he heard his father's voice in his head again. Go to the roulette table. Ayo, he thought. This is weird. And so he went to the roulette wheel. And he stood there for a little while and he heard the voice again. Put $100 on number 16. So he put $100 on number 16. And the work, I don't know what it's called, the croupier or something, he put the ball and spinned it in the wheel and it went round and round and it stopped in number 16. He made a fortune. He said, put all the money, he heard his father again, put all the money on number 27. Ayo, he thought. So he put all the money on number 27. And the croupier put the ball in and spinned the wheel. Went round and round and round and bumped and landed in 27. Ayo, I'm rich. And he heard his father, don't stop yet. Put all the money on number 22. So he put all the money on number 22. And the croupier put the ball in the wheel, spinned it around and around. And it went into number 22 and then bounced out into the one next to it. And his father, the ghost, said, Ayo! Now the moral of this story is that even heavenly beings make mistakes. It's true. Now, the first part of it was a funny story, but the last part is actually true. So, these miracles are depending on heavenly beings. Look, if that was your father, and he was born as a heavenly being, look, didn't he make mistakes when he was in the human realm? Do you think he's going to change that quickly? Of course not. So that's why we don't actually believe in such miracles which come from other beings, because they often make mistakes. But there are such beings. And the reason why I'm now going to tell about serious miracles, ones which I've seen and know about, is that, sometimes there are beings who do protect you, but only if you're a really good person. There's one lady who comes to our monastery every week. One of the reasons she's got so much faith in our monastery is that she was promised she'd come and bring some food and offering one day. But her business received an order and she had to work all night, packing the order ready for consignment the following day. She worked all night without sleep. But she thought, I'd made a promise. I'm going to go to the temple the following day. Even though I'm tired, I haven't slept all night, I have to go. So she quickly made some food. I think she had to buy some food in the McDonald's or fast food because she hadn't time to cook it herself. She put it in her car and started driving the 1 hour to our monastery. It's very dangerous to drive when you're sleepy, because she did fall asleep at the wheel. She felt someone slap her face. I've told this story before. This time I was very mindful before I slapped my face, because sometimes I slapped it too hard. I get into the story as well and bruise myself. And there's a couple of more slaps to come, so I've got to be careful. And she was alone in the car. Someone slapped her awake, and she was in the opposite side of the road with a big truck coming in her direction. She just had enough time to pull the steering wheel over and get into the correct side of the road and just miss a head-on collision. And she thought that was really weird, but then it happened again. She fell asleep a second time. And a second time, I'm not going to slap myself this time. A second time, something slapped her on the cheek. And this time she was actually going off the edge of the road into the ditch. And she said it happened a third time. 3 times something woke her up when she was about to crash by slapping her, and she was alone in her car. And that's how she got to the monastery. And I said, yes, that will happen if you're doing something very good and noble, and then the heavenly beings will help you. But be careful, because if you go to casino and bar, the devils won't slap you at all. It only happens when you're doing something good. And you've seen it here on the Buddhist Fellowship. I've seen it many times about just when you are doing something really wonderful and good, things help you. Perhaps the most amazing tale, true story, and this was actually captured on video, because this was one of our big events in Perth. It was the 30th anniversary of our Buddhist Society in Perth, which we celebrated, I'm not sure how many years ago, it must be about 8 or 9 years ago now, maybe 10 years ago. And remember, this is Buddhism in Australia. Now, we started from nothing and building ourselves up and getting good publicity and getting people in the West to actually accept Buddhism and respect it. It was really hard work. Okay, don't pray for a miracle. If that's your vehicle, it might get towed away. So there we go. So those ones, will you please move those vehicles? Otherwise your vehicle will be reincarnated in the police pound. But anyway, there was this, oh that's right, yeah, the 30th anniversary of our Buddhist Society. And so it's just my character. I'm really a positive monk. If you're going to do something, really do it and have some faith and make a sort of a beautiful event. So when some of our members say, we should do something on our 30th anniversary, let's do something really big. And in Perth, there's one field, it's called Supreme Court Gardens. It's right in the centre of the city. And sometimes people hold events there. Like, people like Rod Stewart give a concert there. Or, some big circus would come there. Or if there's a big rally, they'd have it there. So let's see if it's available that day for hire. Because that 30th anniversary was on a Sunday, and it was on Wesak Day, when the full moon actually fell on the Sunday. So this is perfect. This is the holiest day of the Buddhist year, our 30th anniversary. Let's do a big Vesak ceremony in the Supreme Court Gardens. Forget about the costs. Now let's really do something inspiring. So I managed to convince, whenever my committee hear me speak like this, they think, you don't have to raise the funds, Ajahn Brahm. We're the ones who have to pay for it. But nevertheless, I convinced them, let's do something out of inspiration. So we hired the field. We spent a lot of money on programs, on marquees, on getting this golden Buddha statue from Thailand, especially, and inviting all these dignitaries. And we even invited the Premier of Western Australia. He was the head politician of this big state. And when I woke up in that morning, it was raining. Not drizzling, pouring down with rain. So we checked the weather forecast. And the weather forecast said, it's going to get worse. There was a low pressure system coming. It was a huge storm going to arrive. And when was the storm going to hit the centre of Perth? In the evening. Just when we were going to do our ceremony. And that day, 3 times the Premier's office called me. Are you going to cancel? They asked. No, I said the first time. They accepted that. But middle of the day, they rang again. Are you cancelling? I said, no. Haven't you seen the forecast? They said, don't believe the forecast, believe the monk. No, we're not. And even the third time, they asked me. And I said, no, we're not going to cancel. We're going to go ahead. And all my disciples, they were working in the rain. They were getting soaked, putting up everything. And one of my monks took me aside and said, Ajahn Brahm, said, I've got a lot of respect for you, but you're being stupid. There's a storm coming. It's going to be heavy rains. It's already wet enough. How can you hold this ceremony out in the open, going around with candles and incense in the open, in the pouring rain? And I said, look, it's not going to rain. And he didn't believe me. He thought I was crazy. And so did a lot of other people as well. But when it came to just half an hour before the ceremony, the rain stopped. Now that was enough of a miracle. But then, 5 minutes before the ceremony, I'll always remember this, being in the tent arranging some seats. Because now I'm a monk, I don't just sit there and tell what other people what to do. I get involved, I work. And somebody came into the tent crying. Ajahn Brahm, come outside, quick. I thought something had gone wrong. And I went outside and she just pointed out to the sky. The clouds had parted and the Vesak full moon was clear in the sky. The TV cameras were there. And they kept on saying, this is weird. This is weird. This is weird. And we went through the whole ceremony. The Thai ambassador was there as well. The Thai ambassador to Australia. And many other dignitaries. We held that ceremony. After the ceremony was finished, the clouds came in and it started pouring with rain. That field was flooded that night. The freeway was also flooded and closed. That's the first time it's ever happened. I think the only time it's ever happened. It was the middle of a huge storm. By the time of our ceremony, the storm stopped. Not many people came because they didn't believe we'd gone ahead with that ceremony. Because this is no exaggeration, to the east, to the west, to the north and south of that central part of Perth, branches were coming down. Trees were being uprooted. It was a heavy storm. And it was raining and raining and raining and raining without stop everywhere except where we held the ceremony. Now, I'm not exaggerating. You can check out people who were there at the time. That was such a miracle that the following day I received, via our organizer, an email from the company who hired out the marquees. A huge company, from the managing director. Can you please ask that Ajahn Brahm who's going to win the horse races today? Really convinced him there was something going on. But it only happens when you're doing something good. And that's the wonderful thing about these types of miracles. It's as if when you really get inspired and do something which is actually more than expected, which is good, which is kind, which is inspiring, which is beautiful, if you do something like that, then other beings, and other beings in the universe, they are behind you. They really help out. They want a piece of the good karma as well, I reckon. And they come along and they make it happen. And it's wonderful being a monk who understands how that works and being part of these inspiring events. So, if the Buddhist fellowship or you are really doing something which is extraordinary, extraordinarily kind, extraordinarily generous, extraordinarily giving of your energy for a noble project in the community, not for yourself, but for something which is inspiring, uplifting and noble, don't ever think it's not going to happen. There's other forces will be behind you, making it happen. Look at maybe not so much of an ordinary miracle, Now, our retreat centre, which was open recently, many of the Buddhist fellowship went there, and many of you have contributed for that. Only a week beforehand, people were asking me, have you got a plan B in case it's not finished? And many people thought, it's no way you're going to get it finished on time. That's why they said a plan B. I say, monks don't have plan Bs. And it was only because of the miracle of so many people helping, like monks working till 2 a.m. in the morning, putting on the floor, and other people coming there, and things always coming together at the last moment, and a beautiful sunny day during the ceremony. That's happened so many times in my life as a monk. When you're doing something inspiring and wonderful, it is a miracle. And it's a miracle of good people, of kind people, of people who want to just raise the level of their society and do something beautiful, wonderful, and it happens beyond all expectations. And those are the amazing miracles of life. And they do inspire you. What they're doing is they're inspiring you with the power of goodness. And it's a power, it's a force which people just underestimate how that can actually work. And when we think, oh, it will never work, you'll never be able to do that. It's people who don't understand the miracle of hope in good things, inspiring things, and wonderful things. Unfortunately, we are just fearful people and negative people. There were heat cameras at Singapore airport when I came in. I was actually almost got caught because I thought I had to come here early. So when my plane landed and there was a gate at the far end of the airport, I decided I should walk fast to get through immigration to get here early. And then I thought to myself, if you're really walking too fast and your metabolism goes up, you get quite hot. So I quickly slowed down. But look how much fear there is with this swine flu. I said, swine flu is not dangerous at all. It's the wine flu which is dangerous. The epidemic of wine flu, which is infecting many places of the world. Now that really kills people. So forget about swine flu. Wine flu. That's the danger. Should all be inoculated against wine flu. You know the medication for wine flu? 5 precepts. It's very cheap. We've got plenty of it. We don't run out of any supplies of 5 precept anti-wine flu virus in the Buddhist fellowship. But that was one wonderful miracle about our Wesak ceremony, which was, and here's another miracle. And this is an amazing story. I think I told this story maybe about 1 year or 2 years ago. But this was an Australian man. And like many people, when they got a bit of money and when the airfares were cheap, he went on a holiday to Ladakh in the western Himalayas, trekking. I don't know if you've been around that part of the world, but it's beautiful scenery. They've got the Himalaya mountains, some of the most impressive natural scenery in the world. So he went on this trekking holiday in the western Himalayas in Ladakh. And because he was too busy taking photographs, he lagged behind the main party. And he got separated from them. And he got lost. He got lost in the Himalaya mountains. It was really dangerous. But he was lucky, just as it became twilight, before it became too dark, he saw some lights in the distance. He thought it was a village. He made his way over there, reached there in time. It wasn't a village, it was a monastery, a Buddhist monastery, because there's lots of Buddhist monasteries in that area. So, he was allowed in. Because of his predicament, it was late at night, dark. They gave him a room for the night, like all monasteries would do. They gave him something to eat, gave him a room for the night. But something weird happened in the middle of the night. Around midnight, he was woken up. He was woken up not by a ghost, but by this beautiful music. He never heard music just so wonderful, so delightful before. It was enchanting. And it was just so thrilling. His mind became so joyful and ecstatic. It sent him off into a very peaceful and deep sleep. In the morning, when they fed him some breakfast, and before he was escorted by another monk to find his party, he took his leave of the abbot. But he couldn't help asking the abbot about that experience the previous night. He said, around midnight I heard this wonderful sound. And I've heard these wonderful orchestras, the Berlin Philharmonic. He's heard sort of the Buddhist fellowship chanting. But this was the most amazing and wonderful sound he'd ever heard. What was that? And the abbot said, oh, that's something which is miracle. I'm afraid I can't tell you because you're not a monk. Only monks can know that. He said, oh, come on, I'm in Australia, you can tell me. And he said, look, there's rules which we keep as monks. That sound, only monks can know what that is. Okay, said the Australian, how much? And he got out his wallet. Now there are good monks around, and this was one of them. He said, look, I don't care how much money you give me, or even if you torture me, I will keep that rule. I cannot tell you because you're not a monk. And no matter how this Australian argued and tried to bribe the abbot, in no way was he going to give in. So the man had to go and leave and get back to his party and carry on his holiday. But he couldn't get that sound out of his head. And once you hear some amazing things, you just keep thinking about it. When he got back to Australia, he would think about it so much, he started getting obsessed by it. In the end, he had to go and see a psychologist. And the psychologist gave him some therapy and said, no, don't think about it, it's only sound, but no, it didn't work. So 1 year later, he got an air ticket, went back to India, went back to Ladakh, found that monastery after searching for it, and went up to that abbot and said, look, I've got to find out what that sound is. And the abbot said, look, I told you, sir, I cannot tell you because you're not a monk. Exactly, said the Australian. Ordain me as a monk. Some people become monks for some very strange reasons, but not me. And the abbot said, look, it takes a while to train you before we can let you be a monk, maybe 2 or 3 years. And the Australian said, look, I don't care how long it takes. I have to find out what that sound is. Just train me. I'm going crazy. I'm going mad. I can't think of anything else. Okay, said the abbot. And so he entered the training to be a monk. Because he was Ang Mo, it took longer than usual, 3 years. Until the time came he was about to become a monk. Can you imagine how excited he was? That day he would find out the answer to this thing which had been bugging him for 4 years. What made this amazing, beautiful, most beautiful sound he'd ever heard in his whole life? So they went through the ordination ceremony. And as soon as it was over, what's that sound? You can tell me now, please. I'm a monk. And the abbot said, look, I'll do more than tell you, I'll show you. Come to my room just before midnight. So he went to the abbot's room just before midnight. And the abbot asked him, are you prepared? Because this is not an ordinary thing, these magical supernatural things. Are you ready for this? And the new monk said, look, yes, I've been waiting 4 years. It's been driving me mad, I have to find out. Okay, said the abbot. And he opened his drawer and took out a bunch of keys. He'd never noticed before, in the back of the abbot's room was a curtain. The curtain concealed an old door made out of solid wood. And the abbot rather, took the keys, and the first key was a big wooden key. It was a very old monastery. And he opened that wooden door, and the way it creaked when it went open meant that hadn't been opened for quite a long time. And as they opened the door, he could see a long dark corridor. He never knew that existed in the monastery, even though he'd been there for 3 years now. And as they walked down that corridor, they could see the end of the corridor was another door, a big iron door, but before they even reached it, the music started. I call it music, but it was something much more than that. It was just like heavenly chanting. It was just the most thrilling thing that any ear has ever heard. And now he was getting closer to it. As they reached the iron door, the abbot looked at him to ask him again. He nodded, yes, he wanted to go through. So they took out this old rusty iron key and opened the iron door. As it disturbed the noise, but only for a few seconds. And now he could hear the beautiful sound even clearer. And he noticed at the end of another short corridor was a third door. And as they walked closer, his heart started pounding. But he also started crying. Because the music, music can really arouse some amazing emotions. And if you've heard some powerful music, imagine that multiplied 100,000 times. And that's what this supernatural music was like. And they came to this door made of solid silver. Would be worth a fortune. And he had to get out, you guessed it, the silver key, to open this very, very costly door. And as they opened that door, the sound was even more clear and more beautiful. And you could see there was only one door left to go through, the gold door. And as they approached that golden door, he saw that was encrusted with so many priceless gems, diamonds, rubies, sapphires. And he could see this beautiful light coming from underneath it. And the sound, he knew there was no more doors. It was just on the other side. And the abbot looked at him again. This is the last door. You're about to see something which very few people have ever seen. The source of this most amazing, beautiful sound. Are you really ready? Crying, heart pounding, he nodded. So the abbot took out the golden key, put it in the lock, and opened the door. And there he saw, I'm sorry I can't tell you, you're not monks. Well, I told you! Only monks could know this. Now the reason I tell you that story, how curious you are. Who cares what that is? Why are people so curious that they have to know this, they have to know that, they have to know something else? How much suffering has curiosity given you in your life? It doesn't really matter. But if you really want to know, but these are like miracles. But one of the other miracles, this is one of the Buddhist miracles. This is, when I read it, I thought, this Buddhism is on a different level. And the Buddha, he was someone who actually saw into life deeper than other people. This is one of the famous miracles of the Buddha, which everybody should know about. Probably in your Dharma school when you were kids, or reading, you'd have heard this one. And this was like the miracle of that lady who lost her only son. Kisa Gotami. She lost her only child. She had no husband. He died a long time ago. When her son got very sick, she sold everything to try and get medicine and doctors, to heal her child, as any mother would. It just shows that health is more valuable than any amount of money. Because each one of you, you'd sacrifice anything. You go into debt, to have, your husband, your wife, your parents, your children kept alive in good health. But unfortunately, that sometimes, no matter how much money you have, sometimes you can't buy health. Sometimes the sickness gets worse. And sometimes people die. Her son died. And instead of accepting the death, she was so grief-stricken, she was going to hold on to any possible hope. And if doctors couldn't help her, maybe the miracles could. So she was praying for a miracle to somehow bring her dead son to life when she heard of the Buddha. The Buddha was in the region, and this Buddha was supposed to have such amazing powers and such great boundless compassion. She said, surely such a being who's got so much compassion and so much power, he can help me. So she went to see the Buddha, carrying the dead baby with her, and asked the Buddha, Venerable Sir, you are compassionate and kind. I know you can do this. You have the power. You have the kindness. Can you please bring my only son back to life? It's all I've got. He's my life. I can have no more. My own husband has already died. Please, she begged, bring my son back to life. And the Buddha said, okay, but I need a potion. He said, I'll get you anything you want. Doesn't matter how much it costs. It will cost very little, said the Buddha. It's only made up of 3 mustard seeds. Easy, she said. I can get that anywhere. Just hang on for a few moments. But the Buddha said, every mustard seed has to be got from a different house. And the house where you obtain that mustard seed has to be a house where no one has ever died. Easy, she said. Maybe it take me more than 5 minutes, but just hang on here, don't go anywhere. So she went and ran to the village, knocked to the first house. Can I have a mustard seed? Yeah. Is that all? Sure. It's only a tiny thing. But, she asked. Anyone died here? Of course. No, my grandmother died last week. Sorry, won't do. Next house, can I have a mustard seed? Anyone died here? Yeah, of course. Next house, like how many people in your houses? And Singapore's a new place. This is old villages. How many people have died in your house? Many people have died. And so she went from house to house to house, finding in every house someone had died. The penny dropped. She understood the Buddha's miracle. She went back to the Buddha and said, I've buried my son. I realized your teaching. Because if you had performed a miracle and brought my son back to life, we'd have been parted sooner or later. He would have died, or I would have died, or he would have got some scholarship to New York and left me here in Singapore. He said, we'll never be together forever. But what you told me, by this little Dharma trick, you told me that my son's death is not the only death in the world. You taught me Dhamma, the truth, that you have to let your loved ones go. They can't be with you forever. And it happens to everybody, not just you. It's a natural law. And when she understood that, she could let go of her son, and with it the pain and grief which she felt, once and for all. Now that was a miracle, because it taught her something so much more powerful than just bringing the son back to life again. It taught her something which was so deep and powerful that in a few years' time she became one of the great arahats, enlightened women of the time of the Buddha. The Buddha's gift to her didn't just bring her child back to life, but brought another enlightened being into this world. And you can understand what that enlightenment was. The ability to totally let go of the thing you love the most. And for a mother, your son will be the thing you love the most. She could let it go. And by letting go of her son, other things were so easy to detach from and let go of, which is why she became free. And she said that was the most wonderful miracle which the Buddha had given. The miracle of teaching people how to be free. Not once, but forever and always. And that's why the Buddha actually said, all these other miracles, he said, that's all they are, special effects. That's not the main plot of the movie. So that's not the purpose. That's not the main course. That's just the seasoning, the side dishes. It's not the main thing of why the Buddha taught. His main miracle was to teach and free people from the pain, from the suffering, from the anxiety and fear and guilt and anger which is in their own hearts and which causes so much pain, so much trouble, so much anger, so much wars and so much difficulty in our communities and in our nations and in our world. He said, that is the only miracle which I praise, said the Buddha. The miracle of teaching that frees people from all the pain and burdens and worries of life. Now when I read that and heard that and understood that, I thought, all these other miracles, they're just tricks. They're just worthless. So what if you can fly through the air? So what if you can sort of walk on water? So what if you can read people's thoughts? So what if you can cure a cancer? They're going to get sick again, eventually going to die. You're not sort of healing their bodies, you're just putting off the time for death. Sooner or later, people have got to face that. But teaching the Dhamma, teaching what really needs to be understood, to enjoy these moments, but be able to let them go. To love someone so much that you can do the ultimate act of love, which is to free them. To free them and let them go. If you love a bird, you don't keep it in a cage. You let it fly. Fly up to heaven. Fly through the skies. Be free. Be free, my son. My lover. Be free. Which is the greatest act of love you can ever give. Be free, myself. Fly. Don't be bound to the things of this world. Don't be tied to these material things or to the anger of the past, the pain of what's happened to you. Be free. Fly. That's the most wonderful love we can ever have. And teaching a person, encouraging them, giving them that gift of freedom and real love, that's a miracle. So we would talk about Buddhist miracles. It's not the razzmatazz ones. It's the deep ones. The ones which actually you take away from here and they're with you forever. Miracle of flying through the air, of doing tricks. Yeah, it's fun. But so what? The miracle of a peaceful, happy, free, loving heart. That's a miracle which is worth something. So that's what we mean by the Buddha's miracles. Thank you for listening.
Thank you once again, Ajahn Brahm, for your words of inspiration and wisdom. So now I'd like to open the floor to questions, and there are our volunteers going around with pieces of paper if you'd like to write your questions down so we can read it. Or if you would like to ask a question, come on up.
Okay, very good.
Hi, good evening, Ajahn Brahm. Welcome to Singapore.
Very good.
My question is, for myself, I'm a very hot-tempered person. I get very agitated for very small things. So what must I do in order to improve my temper or things like that? Thank you.
You're a hot-tempered person. How do you actually, to solve that, what should you do? We can actually, there's another miracle we call like holy water, miraculous holy water. So I can get you some miraculous holy water, a whole bucket of it, and get someone to pour it right on top of you next time you get hot. You get hot-tempered. No, just practical solutions to being hot-tempered is, have you got a Buddha statue which you can have around? Well, find a Buddha statue, one which is very peaceful, very meaningful. You give it to me and I can bless it, or some of the other monks. And in places where you get angry, such as your office, put it there. And every time you're about to get angry, have a look at that Buddha statue. And it's amazing how it calms you down. Or if you want photograph, people keep taking photographs. I don't know what they do with them, but put a picture of me there and have a look at me. Can't get angry. It actually works. I just can't do it. Because what it does, it reminds you of something more beautiful in this world than the reason why you're getting angry. The reason why we get hot-tempered is because we lose our understanding of the priorities in life. What's more important? What really is more important, that person who's cheated you or the person who's let you down, is that it's important, but what's more important? The more important is your peace and your happiness and your health as well. And also the harmony of the people you live with. That's more important. So when you understand what's really most important in life, and that's what a Buddha statue or like a picture of your favourite monk or nun or whatever, they remind you of what's really important. Because you see that and think, I understand now. Just let it go. It's not really important. But your peace and happiness, your spirituality, that's important. Okay.
Okay, we certainly have some very interesting questions. The first one. Dear Ajahn Brahm, girls are attracted to me even though they know I'm a playboy.
You girls are really stupid, aren't you?
I think it needs to be corrected. Some girls are really stupid.
Okay, very good.
I.e., they are very willing sexual partners. Is this considered sexual misconduct on my part? Am I breaking the Buddhist precept? Sounds like we have a very guilty person here.
Well, whether you're breaking a precept or not, the reason why you ask that question, you realise that it's not a wise, good thing to do. Yeah, as a human being, if you're not fully enlightened, you like your fun and your games, and a young man, young girls, you enjoy your life at that particular time, but be careful, of what you're doing, because your actions do have consequences. And so, you have a sexual partner, but there's something which happens as a result. There's an intimacy there. And that intimacy, that trust of sharing your body with somebody else and being so close and taking down many of your barriers, that does create this sense of trust and longing, the beginnings of love. And you know that how that could really hurt a person. When you open yourself up to another being and they let you down. And that's sometimes one of the biggest pains in the world. The broken hearts, the relationship, agony. So remember what you're doing there. You're playing not just with the pleasure of sex, but you're playing with the happiness and the great agony and pain of relationships. There's no such thing as a one-night stand. You may have sex with someone just for one night, but you remember that. And sometimes you may not feel it, but the other person does, for days, for weeks, for months afterwards. It's a very delicate area. You can create a great deal of fulfillment and joy for you if you find a partner and you can live with them for a long time and support each other and really love each other and be their best friends. You can also create so much agony and pain that sometimes people commit suicide because of a broken heart. So, be careful. There's something, whether it's a precept or not, ask yourself and be honest to yourself, whoever asks that question. Is that really what you want to do? Are you creating a lot of harm to your sexual partners? If you are, be restrained.
Thank you, Ajahn. Just adding to that, I got a call from a very distressed friend yesterday whose friend was tested HIV positive. So please be very careful. Next question. We do have lots of questions, so you can kindly keep your answers short. I read that during the Buddha's time, an elephant charged at him but did not harm him. How did he stop the elephant? Did he perform supernatural powers?
The Buddha could have done that, but you don't do that as a monk. This was an elephant which was charging, set to kill the Buddha. It was intoxicated with alcohol, charging towards the Buddha. It's a wonderful story. I'm going to get into trouble with Auntie over here by speaking too long. But there was, imagine the scene. In narrow streets of India, a big elephant charging. And this very passive, lovable, soft, cuddly Buddha just walking in the opposite direction. And all the people just say, "Get out of the way, there's an elephant coming, get out of the way." And all the monks, who were supposed to be great monks, they jumped over the wall, climbed up the lamppost, ran to the houses, all except one. And that was this wonderful monk, Ananda, his attendant. And Ananda, who loved the Buddha, stood inside of the Buddha. "Let the elephant take me. I will sacrifice my life for the Buddha." I told that story in the retreat and asked, "Angie, would you stand in front of me and say, 'Take me rather than Ajahn Brahm'?" Would any of you do that? Any of the executive committee? But you don't need to, because the Buddha said, "Very good, Ananda, get out of the way, I can handle this."
Thank you, Ajahn Brahm.
So anyway, what happened next? There they were. It was like, I don't know if any of you saw that movie, High Noon. It was like the Buddha versus the elephant, High Noon. Who is going to win? And as they met each other, the Buddha did have psychic powers. The Buddha could have just taken that elephant by the trunk, swung the elephant 3 times around his head, and thrown him over the Ganges 300 kilometers away. Easy. But that's not how the Buddhas work. What the Buddha did, he just gave this beautiful loving kindness. "Dear Nalagiri, the door of my heart is unconditionally open to you. You can crush me with your powerful feet. You can pick me up with your trunk and smash me against the wall of a house. Whatever you do, I forgive you. I will always love and care for you, great elephant. My door of my heart is open to you no matter what you ever do. I love you." Now, the power of such unconditional love. You can feel a little smidgen of that when I talk about it. Imagine that coming from a Buddha. That elephant just got melted. His anger, his rage subsided. Within a second, Nalagiri was bowing to the Buddha, with the Buddha stroking his trunk. "There, Nalagiri. There, Nalagiri." I'm not going to tell this other story. Because I told this a couple of days ago. People was asking me, and I said last night, "Was this actually a story very true?" It's an Open the Door of Your Heart. One of the monks in Thailand, he came to my monastery, but this was beforehand, meditating in the jungle. I meditated in the jungle many times. A king cobra came up to him. All the other monks opened their eyes. He had his eyes open as well. King cobra. Deadly snake. This is northeast Thailand. They've got a word for that, like a nickname. one-step snake, it's called, in Lao. And the reason why it's called one-step snake is if it bites you, that's all you've got before you die. One step, dead. Venomous. It's no joke, it's what it's called, one-step snake. So here's this snake, coming right up to this monk, raised its head, opened its hood. And what did that monk do? He raised his hand and patted that king cobra on the head. Thank you for coming to visit me. I know this monk, he's got such amazing, powerful, loving kindness. And that snake would never bite. That snake loved every minute of that. It's very rare that a snake has its head patted. So he made the best use of every minute. Oh, carry on. And then when the monk put his hand down, the snake put it in its hood, went down on the ground and went to see another monk. Head up. The monk said, no, not me. That's a modern story of not a big tusker elephant, but a king cobra. And this monk was just patting him on the head. Another monk saw it. True story. That's actually how you deal with this. Loving kindness is much more powerful than anger. So if that's your wife gets angry at you, pat her on the head. Dead. Okay, go on.
Next question. As Buddhists, we're taught to be rational. How do we know there is samsara or reincarnation? It's not scientific, is it?
Great question. What do we mean by scientific? Get the evidence, first of all. And then do an experiment. Die and see what happens. Okay, next question.
No, I'm not letting you off that one.
Okay.
Answer it properly, please.
The answer is, there is evidence there. You can find out the evidence before you die. Go and check the literature. Professor Ian Stevenson. Great work. And some of the monks somebody actually showed me, I think it was on YouTube, a little clip of this philosopher in the United States, a very well-known philosopher, who actually came across Ian Stevenson's work and said, look, this is the evidence here. He said, I'm a hard-nosed philosopher, and I'm just a logician. So if you look at that evidence, there is only one result of that evidence, one conclusion which any reasonable person can take, and that is that people get reincarnated. I'm not a Buddhist, it's a Western philosopher. He said, look, the evidence is there. That if you put aside all your preconceptions, all your ideas, and just look at the evidence clearly, rationally, logically, there are people who have been reincarnated. They remember details of their past lives, clear details, unambiguous. So the likelihood of getting those details by chance is so insignificant. Statistical analysis would mean that there's only one solution to that evidence. They were reincarnated. And then you've got the conclusion that 20 people are being reincarnated. And if 20 people, you prove that 20 people are being reincarnated, it's illogical to believe that they're somehow strange and that each one of you has not been reincarnated. That's evidence number one. Evidence number two, if you do follow your meditation practice and go to places like Jhana Grove and go deep into meditation, you can recall your past lives. Many people who do this, and some people do this, if you can actually recall your past lives, it's a strange thing happens. It's not a hazy memory. You relive it. And people have these experiences. There's no doubt at all in them that was them. And this is not a delusion. This is a certainty. In the same way, where were you this afternoon? What did you do? Where did you go to work this afternoon? Is that an illusion? You're certain that was you this afternoon. Even with more certainty, if you remember these past lives, that was you. And that's one of the classical ways of proving for yourself that reincarnation is a fact. Develop the meditation and test it out. So the evidence is out there. And as a scientist, this is one of the things I think people are just so dogmatic. Why they can't? The evidence is there. It's in the books. There's heaps of it around. But people don't even look at the evidence and they say it's unscientific. Look at the evidence first of all. The experiment is not dying but meditating. And you'll find out, yes, reincarnation is a fact. And it's an important thing to find out. If you knew for certain, especially through your own experience of your past life, that you've lived before and you're going to live again, that will change a lot of your attitudes towards life, especially death. No one would get so upset about death anymore if you really realised this is just a passage into another life. You're going to come back again. It makes life much more interesting. And especially, I'm really hoping that in my lifetime, that we've already got a black American. I want a Chinese Buddhist as the next president of the United States. Or one who believes in reincarnation. Because if he believed in reincarnation, then climate change would be number one of the top of the agenda to fix up. If the President of the United States knew he's going to have to come back here to deal with the problems which he made, then they make much more incentive to preserve this world and not just to have short-term solutions to the problems which beset us. Okay.
Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. There's a book I recommend you to read. It's by Carol Bowman, and the name of the book is called Children's Past Lives. She's a Jew, and she found through experiences of past lives of her children as well as herself. So you might want to check that book out. I do have someone with a microphone out there who would like to ask a question, so please go ahead. Is it working? Okay, if it's not working, I'm going to... Oh. Do you want to just come up here and take my microphone, please?
Well, I hear you saying what is good and what is bad. So what is good, what is bad? Because it seems like if you do think of something as good or bad, isn't that a judgment?
You say what is good and what is bad. If you do something which is good, isn't that a judgment? Of course it's a judgment. That's what we will always be doing. But you can feel in your heart what is good. Basically, whatever harms another being or harms yourself is bad. It's like harm, creating pain, creating hurt in yourself and others. That's what we call bad. And whether it creates more happiness, more peace, more harmony, all the pleasant things in life, whatever creates that towards yourself and others, that is good. So this is an explanation which was given by the Buddha to his son Rahula, which makes it quite easy to understand, what is good and what is bad. And it's not something which somebody tells you that this is good and this is bad. You're not told, for example, topical example, is homosexuality good or bad? Now, it's wrong for anybody to tell you that, to judge and say, in my book, or I'm the head monk, it's good, it's bad, you just have to follow that. Because modern people won't take that. They have to know why. So you ask yourself, is homosexuality good or bad? If you know someone, it may be your son who's gay, it will change your whole attitude and will give you a different answer to that question than many other people. That's my son. I love him. He's a good guy. If that's just part of his nature, and he's good, kind, wonderful, you find that, what's wrong? Which is why, in the end, what's good and what's bad, you will decide, sir, not me. And I just do not have the right to tell you. But I have the duty to help you find out. And then that's a lot of the meaning in life, is finding out what is good and what is bad. But don't believe what the books say. And don't believe what authorities say. It's your job to answer that question. That's the role of your life. And after a while, when you find out what's really good, you find out also the secret to peace and happiness and harmony in life. Because the good is what generates that. The bad just creates too many problems inside you, inside your family, and inside your country. You know it by its results. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. What is the Buddhist view on abortion and divorce?
There we go, abortion and divorce. Again, as a Buddhist monk, especially as a senior monk, I am very different than the Pope. I do not wear funny hats. And I do not pronounce on things. So it's very easy for actually to say abortion is good, abortion is bad, divorce is okay, divorce is not okay. But that doesn't help. You have to find out, well, is abortion bad or is it not bad? First of all, I'm a man. How would I know what abortion is? And why is it that all you women, you're told abortion is good or bad by men who don't know what they're talking about? But I've listened to women who are about to have an abortion or who've had abortions. And I listen to them with empathy and with compassion. And what I found out in my listening with sympathy and with openness, it is probably the hardest decision which you will ever make in your life as a woman. I don't think there's any decision which is harder. Divorce is a much simpler decision than an abortion. And it's such a complex decision to make. And saying it's bad or it's good doesn't help make you make that decision. Instead, the Buddha said, consider 4 things. Are you acting out of selfish desire? Are you acting out of ill will? Are you acting out of stupidity? Are you acting out of fear? It's a checklist. And if you can say, I'm not acting out of selfish desire, I'm not acting out of anger or ill will, and I've considered everything, I've made all the research to find out this being in my womb, what might happen to it, whether I can look after it, whether it's going to be diseased, what the likelihood. I've done the research, I've found out how it will affect myself, my family, all my friends, and even my society. I'm making a wise decision, a considered decision. And I think the most profound part of this Buddhist checklist, it comes from the Buddha, it's called the 4 agatis, is don't act out of fear. And to help women not act out of fear, I said, whichever way you decide, I will always be with you as your friend. And I will never, ever criticize you or blame you, no matter what decision you make. My job as a monk, what I can do, not tell you what to do, but to remove your fear. Remember that decision, if it's made in a proper way, is made with such wisdom and compassion, it can't be that much bad karma. Intention is the root cause of karma. If you're acting out of noble motives, where can the bad karma be? A woman in those situations is in a terrible bind. As they say, between the rock and the hard place. It's the most difficult decision to make. And my job is not to tell you whether it's good or whether it's bad. It's but to help you through that decision making. And to help you afterwards. Because those women who have opted for the abortions, because of the way that society looks at abortions and the fear which many religions impose upon you, literally male-made religions, and they put so much fear and pain on you, they make it so much worse. Buddhism doesn't have that. And my role as a teacher is to take away that fear. Because sometimes you're in positions where you've got not much choice. It's not good, it's not bad, it's neither. Every case is completely individual, and you are the individual. You cannot make these sweeping judgments. That just complicates life. The same with divorce as well. As a Buddhist, we try and keep people together. The first choice is to try and mend the relationships. But if that doesn't work, then to leave with no guilt or anger. If you are going to part, don't think it's the other person's fault. Don't go and blame them. It's not their fault. And don't blame yourself either. It's not my fault. It's just what happens in life. It's anicca. Things which arise, this feeling you want to be together with this person for a while. This is an emotion which arises in the heart. It can't last forever. It'll eventually dissipate. We try and keep it together as long as possible. But when it does fade away, we have this beautiful parting. Had a wonderful time together. I really wish you happiness. And hopefully you wish me happiness as well. Thank you so much for being my wife. Thank you for being my husband for such a long time. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a parting like that? Why not? Interesting question. Why not? Because people don't understand impermanence. And also because they take on this guilt and anger, blaming others or blaming themselves. Buddhism doesn't have blame. We don't blame things. We don't blame people. When I've seen someone do stupid things, I can understand why they do it. I don't blame them. This is just part of the learning experience, the growth of life. So when people do make mistakes, this is what people are like. They do make mistakes. They are stupid. They are selfish sometimes. You're not all enlightened yet. Sometimes I thought once, before I became a monk, I knew enough about Buddhism. So if I'm going to get married, what type of girl would I like to marry? And I thought, someone who never gets angry, someone who's got such a pure heart, someone who's already peaceful. And I realised I was talking about a woman who's enlightened. And then I realised, if she was enlightened, she would have no lust. So what's the point of getting married? I thought about that. So if you're marrying a partner and you want to have sex with them, they've got lust. They're also going to have anger as well. The two go together. So you can't have one without the other. So you can expect, if they're going to have sex with you, they're going to argue with you. They go together. You can't split them up.
That's quite a lesson, Ajahn. He never fails to amaze me. I'm sure it doesn't fail to amaze you all too, with his wisdom. Okay, the next question is, I meditate a lot. My friends and family are aware of this and admire my dedication. However, at the slightest mistake I make, they don't hesitate to point that out to me and saying that you should know better as you meditate. What should my response be in such a case? Should I just let go?
No, you should say, I'm teaching you endurance. I'm teaching you how to sort of let go by making you irritated. You can tell them the story of Ajahn mosquito. Because, those of you who don't know this story, when I was in Thailand, these mosquitoes were driving you crazy. Hundreds of them. No mosquito repellent, no sort of mosquito coils, no mosquito netting. They just bite and bite and bite you. And when we started complaining to Ajahn Chah, can we get some repellent or some nets? So what for? Because stop this mosquito irritating me. He said, they're irritating you? He said, yes. He said, now, if they're irritating you, they are your teacher. So from now on, he said, call them Ajahn mosquito. Because that's what Ajahn means. So you can say, if you make a mistake, you say, now I'm being your teacher. I'm showing you that even meditators aren't perfect. That's a very important lesson you should learn. But you can make fun of them. And don't feel that sort of, you get upset. Say, well, what's the matter? I'm learning, I'm training. When I'm learning and training, I will get irritated sometimes. So you better accept it, because this is, the best I can do.
Okay, since it's getting late, I'm sorry that most of your questions are not going to be answered, so I've just picked one question randomly. Ajahn Brahm, how do we let go attachment and yet have meaningful relationships?
Okay. This is a simile which comes... Actually, I can't do it, this one, but... Imagine this is like the old-fashioned glasses, made out of real glass. And Ajahn Chah would often hold up a glass. He said, "Oh, my glass is cracked. Can you see it?" We'd have a look and say, "No, we can't see any crack in that." Are you going mad again, Ajahn Chah? Because he do some crazy things sometimes. And he said, "The crack is invisible. It's microscopic, but it's there," he said, "in this glass." And one day he said, someone's going to drop this glass or kick it. And that crack, which is already in here, is going to open up. And the glass is going to be unusable as it breaks. So that's why I said this glass is cracked. It's got an invisible potential crack in it. And one day that will happen. He said, because it's a glass, and it's got this crack in it, that's why you have to be careful of it. You can't throw it around or kick it around. Because it's got a crack in it, which might open up at any time. Because it is fragile, he said, that's why you should care for this cup. He said, that's just like the human body, the human life, relationships. They've got a crack in it. Your marriage has got a crack in it. It always had one there. There's nothing wrong. All marriages have cracks in them. Your body has got a crack in it. One day it will open up and you will die. That's why you have to care. You have to care for your relationship, to care for your body, because it is very fragile. But he said that if this was a plastic cup like this one, you don't need to care about it. You can kick it, you can drop it, throw it around. It's plastic, it doesn't break. He said, because we think that our relationships are as permanent as this plastic, it's going to last forever, that's why you don't care enough about it. You kick it, take it for granted, and that's why it breaks. That's why the body, we think it's going to be there forever. And that's why we don't care for it. Because things are fragile, that is why we care. Because we know they're not going to last forever, we know that we can let go, and it does break. That's nature. I can accept that because it had to happen. There's a crack in it. I can let go, but in the meantime, before I have to let it go, I care. That's how you can care and let go when the glass cracks.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Brahm. Shall we give a round of applause to Ajahn Brahm? Thank you very much for the pearls of wisdom. I'm sure that's going to help us in our lives and inspire us on this path of happiness. And I'd like to invite you to join the morning meditation at Fort Canning this Sunday with Ajahn Brahmali at 6:30 in the morning. Last Sunday there was a special meditation at Fort Canning as well, and Straits Times reporter plus the photographer came and took some pictures, so it should be featured sometime this weekend in celebration of Desa. So do come along this Sunday. I don't think there'll be photographers, but you can be the one. You can bring your own camera. But certainly come and enjoy the beautiful bliss and peace of the morning at Fort Canning at Car Park B. And we do check the website for more information. I'd like to also inform you that there will be an aging seminar on the 6th of June. It's not published in this newsletter. The information will be given to you via email or it will be on the website for you to check. As we have a Forest Tradition monk, the abbot of the Bodhinyana Monastery in New Zealand, who will be here. So he'll be part of this seminar on aging on the 6th of June, and more details will be available soon. We will also be launching the Executive Club sometime in August. This is to help our Buddhist executives network and also to learn Dhamma and be inspired to apply that in their business or everyday working life. There is in fact a book called The Buddha and Business if you like some tips on how to conduct yourself as a better Buddhist at work. As we do have to pay for rental of this place, plus advertising newspaper, which some of you may have seen, we hope that you can support by making a donation through the envelope that's been placed on your seat. I'm sure this evening must have been better than having seen a movie. So we hope you can provide your financial support in order for us to keep holding such events in benefiting you and the many people who find this pearls of wisdom very beneficial to their lives. There will be a taking refuge ceremony later on, so those of you who would like to take refuge, please do stay back, and Ajahn Brahm will be conducting this special refuge-taking ceremony. This is to reinforce your commitment to the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path and in taking the 5 precepts. This brings a lot of merits, much more than anything that you could possibly do. So if you feel that it has helped you in the past in becoming a happier person, this will actually launch you forward. So just stay behind for that if you'd like to take the refuge. So with that, I'd like to request Ajahn Brahm to give us a short blessing for Vesak. And could you just put your hands in Anjali position?
Okay.
Thank you.
This is superpower blessing. On Vesak Day, it's always double power. Sabba roga vinimuto, sabba santapa vajito, sabba veramati gando nibuto chatuang bhava, sabitio vivachantu sabba rogo, Vinasatu mate bhavanvantarayo sukhiti kayuko pava apiva danhasi litsanichang vutapachalino chattaro dhamma vatanti Ayuvano sukhang balang.
Let's say rejoice 3 times in Pali. Sadhu, 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 sadhu. Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. And do pick up the newsletter. There's a program for Vesak, which I hope you join. And Ajahn Brahmali will be giving talks. He's the blue-eye version of Ajahn Brahm. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for coming tonight, and we trust that it has been a great evening for you too. Thank you.